My name is Natalia. I'm 32 years old, and 3 days ago I held my husband's hand in a hospital room while doctors told me he had less than 48 hours to live. I'd been at his bedside for 2 weeks, watching him fade away, believing these were our final moments together. I said goodbye to the man I'd loved for 8 years. I walked out of that room believing I'd never see him alive again. Then I heard two nurses talking in the hallway, and everything I thought I knew shattered in an instant. Before I tell you what those nurses said and what I discovered next, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what I uncovered wasn't just a secret, it was a conspiracy that had been destroying my life for years. I'm Natalia, and I need you to understand what my life looked like before everything fell apart. I'm 32 years old, working as a marketing specialist at a mid-sized company in Austin, Texas. My husband, Graham Walker, was 35, working in real estate. We'd been married for 8 years together for 10. We met when I was 24 at a networking event downtown. He was charming, confident, knew exactly how to make me feel like I was the only person in the room. We got married after 2 years of dating. The first 6 years were good. We travelled when we could afford it. We bought a 2-story house in Hyde Park with a mortgage we were still paying off. $200,000 left on it. We talked about having kids someday. We talked about growing old together. But the last 2 years, things changed. Graham became distant. He worked longer hours. He stopped sharing things with me. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd say he was stressed about work. Real estate can be unpredictable, I told myself. Commission-based income means some months are better than others. I believed him because I loved him, because I thought that's what marriage meant, trusting your partner even when things got hard. We lived in that house in Hyde Park. It was beautiful. We'd painted the walls together, picked out furniture together, planted flowers in the front yard together. The mortgage payment was hefty, but we managed. I made $55,000 a year. Graham said he made around $80,000, but his income fluctuated. I handled most of our finances, paid the bills, made sure we stayed afloat. We didn't have children yet. Every time I brought it up, Graham would say it wasn't the right time. We needed to save more money first. We needed to be more stable. I accepted that. I thought we had time. I thought we had forever. 2 weeks ago, on September 18th, everything changed. Graham called me from his office in the middle of the afternoon. His voice sounded weak, strained. He said he didn't feel well, asked if I could come get him. I dropped everything and drove to his office building on South Congress. When I got there, he was sitting in his car in the parking lot. His face was pale grey. Sweat covered his forehead, even though the air conditioning was running. His hands were shaking. I didn't waste time asking questions. I drove him straight to Dell Seton Medical Center. The emergency room doctor, a man named Dr. Raymond Foster, ran tests immediately. Blood work, urine samples, imaging scans. An hour later, Dr. Foster came back with results that made my stomach drop. Graham had severe sepsis, a massive infection in his bloodstream originating from an untreated kidney infection. Dr. Foster looked genuinely shocked. He asked why Graham hadn't come in sooner. He said this kind of infection didn't develop overnight. It had been building for weeks, maybe longer. I stood there confused. Graham never told me he was sick. He never mentioned pain, fever, any symptoms at all. How could he have been walking around with an infection this serious without me knowing? They admitted Graham to the ICU immediately. Within hours, his condition deteriorated rapidly. The infection spread through his bloodstream. His organs started shutting down. They put him on a ventilator, connected him to machines that beeped and hummed through the night. Dr. Foster pulled me aside and said the next 72 hours were critical. Graham's body was failing, multiple organ failure, he called it. I couldn't process it. 2 weeks ago, Graham was at home. He was talking, eating dinner, going to work. How could someone go from normal to dying in such a short time? I didn't leave the hospital. I stayed in that ICU room for 14 days straight. I only went home to shower and grab clean clothes. I slept on the stiff sofa chair next to his bed. I held his hand even though he was in a medically induced coma. I talked to him, read to him, played his favourite music on my phone. The nurses told me that coma patients could sometimes hear their loved ones. So I made sure he heard me. I told him I was there. I told him to fight. I told him I loved him and I needed him to come back to me. One of the night shift nurses, a woman named Brenda, was kind to me. She'd bring me coffee sometimes, check on me during her rounds. She told me I needed to take care of myself too, but I couldn't leave. What if Graham woke up and I wasn't there? What if he was scared and alone? But Graham didn't wake up. His condition got worse. His kidneys stopped working completely. They put him on dialysis. His liver started failing. His heart rate became erratic. The machines kept him alive, but barely. Every day, more doctors came in. They'd look at charts, confer in low voices, shake their heads. I knew what that meant. They were running out of options. Graham's mother, Susan Walker, drove up from Houston when I called her. She cried on the phone, said she'd be there as soon as possible. My own parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago. I had no one else, just Susan and a few friends who stopped by when they could. Graham's older brother Derek didn't come. He said he was travelling for work and couldn't get away. That hurt. Your brother is dying, I thought. How is work more important? I brought our wedding album to the hospital, set it up on the table next to Graham's bed, opened it to our favourite photo, the one where we're laughing foreheads pressed together completely in love. I wanted him to see it if he opened his eyes. I wanted him to remember what we had, what we were fighting for. On the morning of October the 1st, 14 days after Graham was admitted, Dr. Foster came into the room with 2 other physicians. They checked Graham's vitals, studied the monitors, read through his chart. Then Dr. Foster asked if he could speak with me outside. We stood in the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Dr. Foster's face was grave. He said Graham's vitals were declining rapidly. His heart was failing. They were doing everything medically possible to keep him comfortable, but I needed to prepare myself. I needed to say goodbye. My voice came out as a whisper. How long does he have? Dr. Foster hesitated. Hours, he said, maybe less. I nodded. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The hallway tilted around me. I walked back into Graham's room. My legs felt like they were moving through water. Susan was sitting in the corner, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up at me, and I could see she already knew. The doctor must have told her too. I sat down in the chair next to Graham's bed. His hand was cold when I took it. The machines around us continued their rhythmic beeping. The ventilator hissed as it pushed air into his lungs. I looked at his face. Even unconscious, even dying, he was still the man I married, the man who promised me forever. Graham, I don't know if you can hear me, but I need to say this. My voice cracked. Tears fell onto our joined hands. I love you. I've loved you since the day we met at that networking event downtown. You made me laugh when I was nervous. You made me feel seen. 8 years ago, I stood in front of our families and friends and promised to be with you in sickness and in health for better or worse until death do us part. I kept that promise. I'm still keeping it right now. I paused, trying to find words that felt big enough for this moment. I wish we had more time. I wish we'd had children like we talked about. I wish we'd taken that trip to Ireland we always planned. I wish I'd told you I loved you more often, but I'm grateful for every single day we had together. Every morning I woke up next to you. Every dinner we shared. Every stupid argument we had about whose turn it was to take out the trash. I laughed through my tears at that memory. Rest now, baby. Don't fight anymore if you're tired. Don't stay here just for me. I'll be okay. Somehow, I'll figure out how to be okay without you. I leaned forward and kissed his forehead. His skin felt different than it had the past few days. not as hot with fever. Actually, it felt almost normal. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just assumed it was the medications, the machines keeping him stable. I sat there for another 10 minutes just holding his hand, memorizing the feel of it, the shape of his fingers, the small scar on his knuckle from when he'd cut himself fixing the fence 3 years ago. Susan stood up and walked over to me. She put her hand on my shoulder. Her voice was gentle when she spoke. "Natalia, honey, you should go home. Get some rest. You've been here for 2 weeks without a break. You're exhausted. Go home, take a real shower in your own bathroom, sleep in your own bed. Come back tonight. I promise I'll call you immediately if anything changes, but you need to take care of yourself." I started to protest. I didn't want to leave. What if these were his last hours? What if I missed being here when he passed? But Susan was right. I was beyond exhausted. My body ached. My head pounded. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a time in 14 days. I smelled like hospital antiseptic and old coffee. Maybe I did need a few hours away. Just a few. "Okay," I finally said. "Just for a little while. Call me if anything changes. Anything at all." Susan nodded. "I promise." I stood up slowly. My joints protested. I gathered my things. My purse, my phone, my car keys. I took one last look at Graham lying there surrounded by machines. Then I forced myself to walk out of that room. The hallway felt impossibly long. Every step away from Graham's room felt wrong. My instincts screamed at me to turn around, go back, stay with him, but my body was giving out. I needed rest if I was going to be strong enough to face what was coming. It was 8:30 in the morning. The ICU was busy with shift change. Nurses moved between rooms. Doctors made their rounds. The smell of hospital coffee wafted from the break room. I walked past it all in a daze. I was about 30 feet from the nurses' station when I heard voices. 2 nurses standing near a supply cart, talking in hushed tones. They weren't facing my direction. They didn't see me approaching from behind. "I still can't believe they're going through with it," one of them said. It was Alicia, the nurse, who'd checked on Graham that morning. The other nurse, whose name tag read Kim, responded, "I know, it's insane, but the insurance payout is huge, right?" I stopped walking. Something in my brain registered those words. Insurance payout. I stood there, half hidden behind a support column, and I don't know why I didn't announce myself. I should have. But something made me stay quiet and listen. Alicia lowered her voice even more. $300,000. That's what I heard. Kim whistled softly. "And she has no idea. None. She's been here every single day. Poor thing. Do you think Dr. Foster knows? He has to. He's the one signing off on everything. This is so messed up. If anyone finds out..." Alicia cut her off. "Shh, keep your voice down." I heard their footsteps move away down the hallway. I stood frozen behind that column. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. $300,000. Insurance payout. She has no idea. They're going through with it. My brain tried to make sense of what I'd just heard. Graham had a life insurance policy. I was the beneficiary. The policy was for $300,000. But why would the nurses know about that? Why would they be talking about it like it was some kind of secret? And what did they mean by going through with it? Going through with what I felt dizzy? The hallway seemed to spin around me. I put my hand against the wall to steady myself. My purse slipped off my shoulder and I had to catch it. This didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I should go back to Graham's room, talk to Susan, ask her if she knew anything. But what would I even say? I overheard some nurses talking and now I'm paranoid. No, I needed to go home. I needed to think clearly. Maybe I was so exhausted that I'd misheard. Maybe they were talking about a different patient. The ICU had other cases. Maybe it was all just a terrible coincidence. I forced my legs to move, walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the ground floor. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my car keys. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember most of it. I just remember pulling into our driveway and sitting there in the car, staring at our house, the house Graham and I had bought together, the house where we'd planned to raise children, the house that now felt like it belonged to a different life. I went inside. The silence was deafening. Graham's shoes were still by the front door. His jacket hung on the hook. His coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter from the morning he'd gotten sick. I'd been too scared to move anything like keeping his things in place might somehow keep him alive. I walked into our bedroom, sat down on the edge of our bed, tried to replay the nurse's conversation in my mind, tried to remember their exact words. Insurance payout. Going through with it, she has no idea. What if they were talking about Graham, about me, but why? Why would nurses be discussing our life insurance policy unless something wasn't right? I sat there on the bed, my mind racing. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit here wondering and worrying. I needed answers. Then I remembered. Graham's phone. He'd left it at home the day he got sick. We'd rushed to the hospital so fast that he hadn't grabbed it. It had been sitting on his nightstand for 2 weeks. I'd never touched it. I'd never felt the need to. We trusted each other. At least I thought we did. I reached over and picked up his phone. The screen lit up, password protected. I tried our anniversary date. Nothing. I tried my birthday, which used to be his password for everything. Nothing. My hands were shaking as I tried his own birthday. It unlocked. My stomach twisted. Graham had changed his password. He used to always use my birthday. Why would he change it? I opened his messages first. Most of them were work-related. Conversations with clients about properties, appointment times, contract negotiations. Nothing unusual. But then I saw a thread with just a phone number. No name attached. The area code was 281, Houston. The last message was from 18 days ago, the day Graham went into the hospital. The unknown number had written, "Are you ready?" Graham had replied, "Yes, tomorrow." Then the unknown number wrote, "Don't mess this up." Graham's response, "I won't. Trust me." I stared at my phone screen, my vision blurred with tears. What did this mean? Ready for what tomorrow? What? Don't mess what up? I scrolled up through older messages in that thread. From a month earlier, I found this exchange. Unknown number, 300K is a lot of money. Worth the risk, Graham. Absolutely. She'll never know. Unknown number. You better be right. I'm not going down for this. She'll never know. That was me. Graham was talking about me. About $300,000. The exact amount of his life insurance policy. I dropped the phone. It bounced on the bed. I stood up, paced across the room. My breathing came in short, sharp gasps. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. Those words were right there in black and white. Graham had been planning something involving $300,000, something I wasn't supposed to know about. I picked up the phone again with trembling hands, opened his email app. His password was saved, so it opened immediately. I searched for anything from the insurance company, found an email from Lone Star Life Insurance dated 3 months ago. Subject policy update confirmation. I opened it. Dear Mr. Walker, this email confirms that your life insurance policy has been updated as requested. Your coverage amount has been increased from $100,000 to $300,000 effective immediately. Your new monthly premium is $150. The beneficiary remains Natalia Walker. Graham had increased his life insurance without telling me. 3 months ago, right around the time he started acting distant and secretive. Why would he do that? Why would he triple his life insurance and not mention it? Unless he was planning something. I kept searching through his emails, found another one from 2 months ago, from a law office, Hughes and Associates, subject RE consultation. Dear Graham, As discussed, the estate planning documents are ready for your signature. Please come by the office at your earliest convenience. Regards, Stephen Hughes. Estate planning. Graham went to a lawyer for estate planning without telling me. I sat down hard on the bed. Everything was spinning. None of this made sense, unless Graham knew he was going to die, unless he'd been planning for it. But why? Why would a healthy man in his 30s suddenly increase his life insurance and write a will? I grabbed my own phone and called that unknown number from Graham's messages. My hands shook as I held the phone to my ear. It rang 4 times. Then went to voicemail. A generic, automated voice, no personal greeting. I left a message. My voice came out high and strained. "Hi, this is Natalia Walker, Graham Walker's wife. I need you to call me back immediately. It's urgent." I hung up, waited, stared at my phone. No call back. I needed more information. I opened my laptop, logged into Graham's email on the computer so I could see everything more clearly, searched for anything from Hughes and Associates, found the lawyer's phone number in the email signature, looked up the address. Downtown Austin on Congress Avenue. I could drive there right now. I should go back to the hospital. I should be with Graham, but I needed answers first. Something was very wrong, and I needed to understand what before I went back there. I grabbed my car keys, drove downtown, found parking near the office building, took the elevator to the 5th floor, walked into the glass doors marked Hughes and Associates. A receptionist looked up from her desk. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with her hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Can I help you? I need to see Stephen Hughes. It's about my husband, Graham Walker." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's an emergency. My husband is dying in the hospital. I need to know what documents he signed with Mr. Hughes." Her expression softened. She could see the desperation on my face. "Let me check if he's available." 5 minutes later, a man in his mid-50s walked out. Grey hair, expensive suit, serious expression. He extended his hand. "Mrs. Walker, I'm Stephen Hughes. Please come into my office." I followed him down a hallway into a corner office with windows overlooking the street. He gestured to a chair. I sat down. He sat across from me behind a large wooden desk. "Mrs. Walker, I'm very sorry to hear about your husband's condition, but I'm afraid anything Graham discussed with me is protected by attorney-client privilege. I understand that. But I need to know what he was planning. I found an email from you about estate planning documents. What did he sign?" Hughes studied me for a moment. Then he sighed and opened a file on his desk. "You're mentioned in the documents, so I suppose I can share the relevant information. Graham came to me 2 months ago. He said he'd been diagnosed with a terminal illness and wanted to make sure his affairs were in order." My heart stopped. What terminal illness? That's impossible. He wasn't sick 2 months ago. He only got sick 2 weeks ago. Hughes looked genuinely surprised. He told me he had stage 4 kidney disease, that he had limited time left and wanted to create a will. That's not true. He was completely healthy. He never mentioned any diagnosis. Hughes's expression shifted. "Are you telling me Graham lied to me? I don't know. I honestly don't know, but what does the will say? It's straightforward. Everything goes to you. The house, any savings, his life insurance policy. You're the sole beneficiary of his estate." I stood up, started pacing. So he made a will, leaving everything to me. He increased his life insurance to $300,000. He told you he was dying, but he never told me any of this. Hughes watched me carefully. "Mrs. Walker, are you suggesting something improper?" "I'm suggesting my husband was planning something, and I need to find out what." My phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was the unknown number, the one from Graham's messages. I have to take this. I stepped out into the hallway, answered the call. "Hello," a woman's voice, familiar somehow, though I couldn't place it immediately. "Natalia, this is Susan, Graham's mum." I was confused. "Susan, why are you calling from a different number? This is my work phone. Listen, I need to talk to you. Can you come back to the hospital? What's wrong? Did something happen to Graham? Just come. Now." please, and don't tell anyone I called you." She hung up. I stood there in that hallway, staring at my phone. Susan was the one who'd been texting Graham. Susan, his own mother, the woman who'd been crying beside me in the hospital, the woman who'd comforted me. What was happening? I thanked Hughes quickly and left his office, got back in my car. My mind was reeling. Susan was involved in whatever this was. The $300,000. The insurance. The cryptic messages. I drove back to the hospital faster than I should have. Parked in the emergency lot. Ran inside, took the elevator up to the ICU floor. My heart was pounding. When I walked into Graham's room, Susan was there. But she wasn't alone. A man stood next to her. Tall, dark hair, mid-30s. It took me a second to recognize him. Derek, Graham's brother. The one who'd said he couldn't come because of work. "What's going on?" I demanded. Susan turned around. Her face was pale, her eyes were red, but this time not from crying, from fear. "Natalia, we need to talk. Outside." "No. Talk here. Now." Derek stepped forward. His jaw was tight. "Okay, fine. You deserve to know the truth." "What truth?" He took a deep breath. "Graham isn't dying." Time seemed to stop. The machines beeped around us, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. "What did you just say?" Susan's voice was barely a whisper. "He's been faking it, the whole thing, the sepsis, the organ failure, all of it." I looked at Graham lying in that hospital bed, connected to machines, a breathing tube down his throat. "How can you fake that?" Derek answered. "He took medication to create symptoms. He manipulated test results. He had help from someone on the medical staff." My legs felt weak. I grabbed the edge of the bed to steady myself. Why would he do that?" Susan was crying now. Real tears this time. "The life insurance. $300,000. He was going to fake his death and collect the money through you. Then what?" Derek finished the sentence. "Then disappear. With her. With his girlfriend. They've been planning this for months." Girlfriend. The word hit me like a physical blow. Graham had a girlfriend. While I'd been working to pay our mortgage, while I'd been planning our future, while I'd been sitting in this hospital room for 2 weeks believing my husband was dying. Who? My voice came out as a growl. "Who is she?" Susan wouldn't meet my eyes. "A nurse. Her name is Alicia Patterson. She works here in the ICU. She's been helping him fake everything. The medical records, the test results, everything. Alicia. The nurse who'd brought me coffee, who'd told me to take care of myself, who I'd overheard in the hallway talking about the insurance payout. It all clicked into place. The pieces fell together with horrifying clarity. Graham had planned this entire thing. He'd increased his life insurance. He'd created a will. He'd gotten a nurse to help him fake a terminal illness. He was going to pretend to die. I'd collect the $300,000, and then he'd disappear with his mistress and the money. I looked at Susan, at Derek. "How long have you known?" Susan's voice broke. "I found out 3 days ago. Derek told me." "Derek?" I turned to him. "And how long have you known?" His face was full of shame. "A month. Graham told me everything. He wanted me to help him. After he supposedly died, I was supposed to help him create a new identity. Fake documents. We were going to split the insurance money. I agreed at first. I'm ashamed to admit it. My business is failing. I'm drowning in debt. The money seemed like the answer." He paused, looked at me. "But then I saw you here, every single day, barely eating, barely sleeping, crying over a man who was lying to you, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't watch you suffer like that for a fraud. So I told my mother, we've been trying to figure out how to tell you. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything I'd believed for 2 weeks was a lie. The man I loved, the man I'd married, the man I'd sat beside day after day, holding his hand, praying he'd survive. He wasn't dying. He was acting. Where is this nurse? Where is Alicia? Derek shook his head. She called in sick this morning. Probably knew something was going wrong. We haven't been able to reach her. I walked closer to the bed, looked down at Graham, really looked at him. His skin wasn't the greyish colour of someone near death. It was normal, healthy even. His chest rose and fell steadily. His muscles hadn't wasted away like they should have after 2 weeks of critical illness. How had I not seen it? How had I been so blind? I leaned down close to his ear. I know you're awake, I said quietly. Open your eyes, Graham. Nothing, no response. He kept up the act. I said it louder. I know you're faking this. Open your eyes. Still nothing. Fine. I reached over and pulled the IV line out of his arm. Not violently, but firmly. The machines started beeping. Alarms went off. Within seconds, nurses rushed in. What's happening? And then Graham's eyes flew open. He sat up, pulled the breathing tube out of his own throat, coughing. What the hell? The nurses froze, stared at him in shock. I looked straight at my husband. There you are, I said. His eyes met mine. For just a second, I saw panic there. Then it shifted to anger. Damn it, he muttered. The room erupted in chaos. One of the nurses, an older woman I hadn't seen before, grabbed Graham's wrist to check his pulse. Another rushed to the monitors, trying to make sense of what just happened. Dr. Foster burst through the door seconds later. What's going on in here? He looked at Graham, sitting up awake, breathing on his own. Mr. Walker, you're conscious? Graham's face was red. He looked at me with pure fury. You ruined everything. Dr. Foster's confusion deepened. Someone explain what's happening. Now. I found my voice. It came out steady cold. My husband has been faking his condition. The sepsis, the organ failure, all of it. He's been planning to fake his death to commit insurance fraud. Dr. Foster's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to anger in the span of 3 seconds. That's impossible. We ran tests, blood work, imaging. I pulled out Graham's phone, held it up. I have text messages proving he planned this with someone, a nurse named Alicia Patterson. She helped him manipulate the test results. Dr. Foster's face went pale. Alicia, yes, they're having an affair. They were going to take the life insurance money and disappear together. Graham finally spoke. His voice was hoarse from the breathing tube. You can't prove any of that. I can. I have your phone, your messages, emails showing you increased your life insurance 3 months ago without telling me, a will you created with a lawyer who you told you were terminally ill when you weren't. Derek stepped forward. I can confirm it. Graham told me the plan a month ago, wanted me to help him create fake documents after he supposedly died. Dr. Foster looked like he might be sick. He turned to one of the nurses. Call hospital security, now, and get administration down here. Graham swung his legs over the side of the bed, tried to stand up. Where do you think you're going? I said. Away from you. This is over. You're not going anywhere. I pulled out my phone, started dialing 911. Graham lunged toward me, trying to grab my phone. Derek blocked him, put himself between us. Don't touch her, Derek said. Susan was crying again. Graham, stop. Please just stop. I stepped back, pressed the call button. The operator answered. 911. What's your emergency? I'm at Del Seaton Medical Center, ICU floor. I need to report insurance fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud. My husband has been faking a terminal illness to collect a fraudulent life insurance claim. The operator asked me to stay on the line, said officers were being dispatched. Graham slumped back onto the bed. His shoulders sagged. This isn't how this was supposed to go. How was it supposed to go? I asked. You fake your death. I cry at your funeral. I collect $300,000. Then what? You wait a few months and contact me for the money? Or were you just going to let me think you were dead forever while you lived somewhere else with your girlfriend? He didn't answer, just stared at the floor. Within 10 minutes, 2 police officers arrived, a man and a woman, both in uniform. They asked what was happening. I explained everything, showed them the text messages on Graham's phone, told them about Alicia Patterson, the nurse who'd helped him. Dr. Foster pulled up Graham's medical records on the computer, started going through them with the officers. His face grew darker with each page. Some of these test results have been altered. These signatures here, they're Alicia Patterson's, but these values don't match the samples we actually drew. Someone changed them in the system. The female officer looked at Graham. "Mr. Walker, we need to take you in for questioning." Graham stood up. He was still wearing a hospital gown. They let him change into his street clothes that were in the closet. Clothes I'd brought from home days ago, thinking he'd need them when he recovered, not knowing there was nothing to recover from. The officers read Graham his rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Graham looked at me one more time before they led him away. His expression was cold. "You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were sooner." They took him away. The room went quiet except for the sound of Susan crying. Dr. Foster turned to me. "Mrs. Walker, I am so deeply sorry. If I had known, if I had suspected any of this, it's not your fault. He fooled all of us." The police also wanted to find Alicia Patterson. One of the officers asked for her address. Hospital administration provided it. They sent units to her apartment. I learned later that when police arrived, Alicia was packing her car, suitcases in the trunk. She was trying to run. They arrested her on the spot, charged her with insurance fraud, falsifying medical records, conspiracy to commit fraud. Over the next 2 days, the truth came out. Graham had met Alicia a year ago when he came to the hospital for a minor sports injury. They'd started an affair. Graham had been planning this scam for months. He'd researched how to fake medical conditions. Alicia had access to the hospital systems, could change test results, forge doctor signatures. The plan was simple. Graham would fake a terminal illness. I'd watch him supposedly die. I'd collect the life insurance money. Graham would use fake documents to create a new identity. After a few months, he'd contact me through an intermediary claim he needed money for some emergency. I'd send it thinking I was helping his mother or brother, and Graham and Alicia would disappear to Mexico with $300,000 to start a new life. It would have worked if I hadn't overheard those nurses, if I hadn't investigated, if Derek hadn't developed a conscience. Tests confirmed what we already knew. Graham had no sepsis, no kidney failure, no organ damage. He was completely healthy. He'd taken medications to mimic symptoms, fever reducers to raise his temperature temporarily, drugs to affect his heart rate. Alicia had done the rest, changing his blood work results in the system. Dr. Foster was devastated. He felt betrayed by one of his nurses, felt he'd failed as a physician by not catching the deception. But how could he have known he'd trusted his staff, trusted the test results? No doctor expects a patient to be faking a fatal illness. The insurance company Lone Star Life Insurance launched their own investigation. An investigator named Marcus Trent called me in for an interview. He was a middle-aged man with greying hair and sharp eyes. "Mrs. Walker, your husband, was planning to file one of the most elaborate fraudulent claims we've ever seen. Thanks to your intervention, he never got the chance. The policy is voided. He won't see a penny, and will be pressing criminal charges as well. What happens now? He'll face multiple felony charges. Insurance fraud carries a maximum of 10 years in prison. Conspiracy to commit fraud is another 5 years. Falsifying documents could add more time. And Alicia, she's facing the same charges. Plus, she'll lose her nursing license permanently." I sat there in that investigator's office trying to process everything. The man I'd loved for 8 years. The man I'd married. The man I'd trusted completely. He'd been willing to put me through unimaginable emotional trauma just to steal money. The hardest part, he'd watched me suffer. He'd lain in that hospital bed while I cried beside him, while I held his hand and begged him to fight, while I said goodbye, and he'd felt nothing, no guilt, no remorse, just impatience probably. waiting for the plan to play out. How do you recover from that kind of betrayal? 1 week after Graham's arrest, I hired a divorce lawyer. Her name was Patricia Donovan, a woman in her 50s with steel grey hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She looked at my case for about 10 minutes before looking up at me. This is one of the clearest cases of fraud and emotional abuse I've ever seen. We'll have no problem getting you everything. I filed for divorce immediately. The grounds were fraud, emotional cruelty, and emotional abandonment. Graham was being held in county jail. His bail had been set at $50,000. No one paid it. Not Derek, not Susan. He sat in that cell waiting for his trial. The charges against him kept piling up. Insurance fraud, maximum 10 years. Conspiracy, 5 years. Falsifying documents, 3 years. The district attorney wanted to make an example of him. This kind of elaborate fraud couldn't be tolerated. Alicia faced the same charges. When police questioned her, she tried to blame everything on Graham. Said he'd manipulated her, said she thought she loved him and he'd taken advantage of that. But the evidence showed otherwise. Text messages between them showed Alicia had been an active participant. She'd researched how to fake test results. She'd been the one to suggest using certain medications. She was just as guilty. 3 months later, both of them took plea deals. Graham pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. Alicia got 5 years and lost her nursing license permanently. She'd never work in healthcare again. The divorce was finalized quickly. I kept the house. Graham had to sign over his ownership rights. There were no assets to split because everything had been in both our names and he'd committed fraud. The judge ruled I was entitled to everything, but keeping the house meant I had to afford it. I had a good job, but the mortgage was steep. I considered selling, starting fresh somewhere else. In the end, I decided to stay. This was my home. I wasn't going to let Graham take that from me too. The first month after everything came out was the hardest. I felt numb. Hollow. I'd go to work, go through the motions, come home to an empty house. I couldn't cry, couldn't feel anything, just a vast emptiness where my life used to be. My boss, Linda Garrison, called me into her office 2 weeks after Graham's arrest. She was a kind woman in her early 50s who'd always been supportive. Natalia, take a month off. Paid leave. You need time to process what happened. I don't need... Yes, you do. This is not optional. Go home. Rest. Heal. We'll see you in a month. So I did. I took the month off. Spent the first week just sleeping. My body finally relaxed enough to rest after weeks of hospital vigils and stress. I'd wake up at odd hours disoriented, thinking I needed to get back to the ICU before realizing there was no ICU to get back to. The second week, I started cleaning. I went through the house room by room, threw out everything that belonged to Graham, his clothes, his shoes, his books, his toiletries, everything. I filled garbage bags and bags, donated what I could, threw away the rest. I took down the photos of us from the walls, packed them in a box, stored them in the garage. I couldn't look at them. Those photos showed a woman who'd been lied to, a couple that never really existed. I repainted the living room, changed it from the grey Graham had picked to a soft mint green I'd always loved. I bought new throw pillows, new curtains, slowly made the house feel less like ours and more like mine. I replaced our mattress, bought new sheets, new comforter. I couldn't sleep in that bed, knowing Graham had lain there planning my betrayal. The new bed felt like a fresh start. My therapist, Dr. Elena Vasquez, helped me process everything. She was a woman in her 40s with warm brown eyes and a gentle voice. What you experienced was profound trauma, betrayal trauma. Your husband violated your trust in the deepest way possible. It's going to take time to heal. How much time? There's no timeline for healing. Everyone moves at their own pace, but you will heal. I promise you that. Dr. Vasquez helped me understand that what Graham did wasn't my fault. I'd done nothing wrong. I'd loved him, trusted him, been a good partner. His choices were his own. His betrayal said everything about him and nothing about me. I started attending a support group for survivors of emotional abuse, met other women who'd been through similar betrayals. Not quite as dramatic as mine, but betrayals nonetheless. Husbands who'd hidden finances, partners who'd led double lives. We shared our stories, supported each other, reminded each other that we weren't alone. Susan called me a few weeks after Graham's sentencing. Her voice was thick with tears. "Natalia, I'm so sorry for everything, for raising a son who could do this to you. I failed him somehow, failed to teach him right from wrong. Susan, this isn't your fault. Graham made his own choices. He's an adult. You're not responsible for what he did. I should have seen the signs, should have known he was capable of this." Susan and I started meeting for coffee once a month. She needed to process her own grief, the loss of her son, not to death, but to his own terrible choices. We found comfort in each other, strange as that seemed. Derek apologised too, came to my house one evening with flowers. "I'm sorry I almost participated. I'm sorry I didn't tell you immediately when Graham told me you deserved better from all of us. You told me in the end, that's what matters. You could have let it happen, but you didn't." Derek helped me with some repairs around the house, fixed a leaky faucet, replaced some broken tiles. We developed a friendship built on mutual respect. He was trying to be the brother Graham never was. 6 months after the arrest, my life had found a new rhythm. I was back at work full-time. I'd been promoted to senior marketing manager with a raise that helped with the mortgage. I started taking yoga classes, learned to meditate, found peace in quiet moments. I took my first solo trip, drove to Santa Fe, New Mexico for a long weekend, stayed in a small bed and breakfast, walked around art galleries, sat in cafes, did whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. The freedom felt incredible. My friends Claire and Jamie were amazing through everything. Claire was my co-worker, Jamie was her wife. They invited me over for dinner every week, made sure I wasn't isolating, reminded me that life could still have joy in it. "We're so proud of you," Claire said one night over pasta. "You're a survivor. You're so much stronger than you think." I wasn't ready to date. The thought of trusting someone that deeply again terrified me, but I was open to the possibility of someday, maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years. There was no rush. A year after everything fell apart, I stood in my living room looking around at what I'd built. The house felt different now, lighter. It was fully mine. No ghosts, no memories I couldn't escape, just a space that reflected who I was becoming. My life had stabilized. Work was good. I was being considered for director-level positions. Financially, I was managing. The mortgage was still steep, but doable. I'd even started saving a little each month. I still went to therapy, though less frequently, once a month now instead of weekly. Doctor. Vasquez and I had processed most of the trauma. Now we focused on building my future rather than healing my past. I'd started dating someone. His name was Ethan. We'd met through mutual friends 3 months ago. He was a software engineer, quiet, thoughtful, patient. He knew my story. I'd told him on our second date, figuring it was better to be upfront. He'd listened without judgment. That's a lot to go through. "I'm sorry someone hurt you that way." We took things slowly. Ethan never pushed. He understood I needed time to rebuild trust. We went on simple dates, coffee, movies, walks around Town Lake, getting to know each other without pressure. I wasn't ready to say I loved him, wasn't sure if I'd ever say that to anyone again. But I enjoyed his company. He made me laugh. He was honest, transparent. When he said he'd call, he called. When he made plans, he kept them. Small things. But after Graham, those small things meant everything. One afternoon in November, a year and 2 months after Graham's arrest, I received a letter in the mail. The return address was the federal prison where Graham was serving his sentence. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Natalia, I know you'll probably never forgive me. I don't expect you to. What I did was unforgivable. I let greed and selfishness destroy the best thing in my life. You deserved so much better than me. You deserved a husband who cherished you, protected you, honored his vows. I failed you in every possible way. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I hope you've found happiness. You deserve it more than anyone. Graham. I read the letter twice, then folded it up and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't cry, didn't feel angry, just felt empty, neutral. The man who wrote that letter wasn't the man I'd married. Or maybe he was, and I'd just never seen him clearly. I didn't respond to the letter. There was nothing to say. That chapter of my life was closed. He could write all the apologies he wanted. It didn't change what he'd done, didn't erase the trauma. Some things can't be fixed with sorry. I sat on my porch that evening with a cup of tea watching the sunset. The air was crisp with the promise of winter. I thought about how far I'd come in a year, from a woman standing in a hospital hallway, overhearing nurses discovering her entire life was a lie, to a woman sitting peacefully in her own home, building a future she could be proud of. The healing wasn't linear. Some days I was fine. Some days the anger came back sharp and hot. Some days I cried for the life I thought I'd had, but those days became less frequent. The good days started outnumbering the bad. Dr. Vasquez had told me something that stuck with me. Healing isn't about forgetting, it's about integrating what happened into your story without letting it define you. Graham's betrayal was part of my story now, but it wasn't my whole story. I was more than what happened to me. I was what I did next, how I rebuilt, how I chose to move forward. People often ask me how I knew something was wrong. The truth, I didn't. Not at first, but my gut whispered that something wasn't right. And I listened. If I hadn't stopped in that hallway, if I hadn't heard those nurses talking, if I hadn't trusted my instincts enough to investigate, Graham would have succeeded. I would have mourned a man who wasn't dead, collected insurance money built on lies, and never known the truth. That moment changed everything, not because I discovered his betrayal, but because I discovered my own strength. I learned I was capable of facing horrible truths, of making hard decisions, of standing up for myself even when it meant destroying what was left of my marriage. I learned that love isn't about blind faith. It's about trust, yes, but it's also about awareness, about paying attention to the small inconsistencies, the passwords that change, the secrets kept, the gut feelings ignored. I'd ignored too many red flags because I wanted to believe in us. I wanted to trust him, but trust has to be earned. And Graham stopped earning it long before I realized it. Graham taught me what I don't want in a partner: deception, manipulation, selfishness disguised as love. Someone who views me as a means to an end rather than a person worthy of respect. But he also taught me what I do deserve: honesty, respect, transparency, someone who sees me as a partner, not a pawn in some scheme, someone whose words match their actions, someone I don't have to investigate or second guess. The nurse's conversation in that hallway saved my life, not from death, but from a slow suffocation of lies. If they'd been quieter, if I'd walked by sooner, I might never have known. I'd have spent years believing Graham died loving me, never knowing he'd been planning to steal from me all along. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if the plan had succeeded. Graham would have faked his death. I'd have collected the insurance money. Months later, someone claiming to be a lawyer or a distant relative would have contacted me, told me Graham had debts I didn't know about, asked me to help settle them, and I would have, because I'd have been grieving vulnerable. I'd have given them money thinking I was honouring Graham's memory, and I'd never have known I was funding his new life with another woman. That's the part that haunts me most. Not just the betrayal, but how close he came to getting away with it, how easily he manipulated me, how thoroughly he'd planned my emotional destruction. But I survived. More than survived. I rebuilt my life into something stronger than before. I learned I don't need someone else to be complete. I can pay my own mortgage, make my own decisions, find my own happiness. Ethan is part of my life now, but he's not my whole life. I have friends, work, hobbies, goals that have nothing to do with being someone's partner. I'm whole on my own. If Ethan and I work out, wonderful. If we don't, I'll be okay. That's the real victory. Not that Graham went to prison, not that Alicia lost her career, but that I found myself again. The person I was before Graham. Strong, independent, capable. She'd been buried under years of trying to be the perfect wife, trying to save a marriage that was already dead, but she was always there, just waiting for me to remember her. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered a secret that completely changed how you saw someone you loved? Have you ever had to choose between the truth and the comfortable lie? Drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you handled it. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's questioning their own instincts. Someone who needs permission to investigate when something feels wrong. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you're stronger than you think, that you can survive betrayal, that you can rebuild, and that trusting yourself is the most important relationship you'll ever have. Take care of yourselves. Trust your gut. And remember, the truth might hurt, but lies hurt more. Always.